Hello and welcome back to the Redscue kitchen. Today we are doing, we're going to be talking about some of the kind of foods and behaviours that I did around Reds that kind of got me into that underfueling, overtraining cycle. And I think a massive part for me was I had a massive mindset of scarcity. So it wasn't just scarcity around food, it was scarcity around I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time to do what I need to do. I don't have enough time to train. I don't have enough time. So I'd wake up and I'd immediately be like, I need to train right now or my day hasn't been productive. And for me, it meant that my body never slowed down and my mind never slowed down, because I'd sit down and I'd be thinking, oh, I need to go and train, or oh, I don't have enough time to train, or I don't have enough time to do everything that I need to do. And it was a complete mindset of scarcity. I didn't have enough food in my body, and people don't realize that makes your mind have such a mindset of scarcity. So I felt like I didn't have enough in any aspect of my life. And the part that doesn't get talked about enough is the impact on all aspects of life. So I was nauseous all the time. I mean, I'd wake up a lot of the time at like 3, 4 a.m. starving. Wouldn't be able to get back to sleep, so I'd have a coffee, maybe something to eat. Then I'd probably have another coffee. And actually this Lent, I stopped drinking coffee and I stopped drinking hot chocolate, because for me, people say drink your your liquid calories, but for me that was actually quite harmful, because I was supplementing my meals with coffee. So breakfast and lunch were filled with coffees and hot chocolates, and it was always with the low calorie things. So it was the lower calorie hot chocolate packets, it was the black coffee. And I'm not saying you can't enjoy those, but for me they became my entire diet. And it's really interesting that a lot of times people think that in Reds it's all about orthorexia, and orthorexia is extreme healthy eating. So when healthy eating is taken too far, so you're not just saying, oh, I need to have my fruits and vegetables. It's like, oh, I will only exclusively eat things that are deemed healthy in society. Things like, I can't even name any examples at this point. But for me, it wasn't really about orthorexia. There was definitely an element where I just opened my fridge and I could have 10 different foods in there. And for me, it was just like, oh, I don't want any of them. For me, it was just like a lack of want. I didn't want any food. It wasn't that a food had to be healthier. I just didn't want any food. And I ended up living off of oatmeal. I had oatmeal quite frequently for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now, I think it kind of ties into the obsessive nature of Reds, that you try and cling to something that is of comfort to you. And for me, that was eating oats, because maybe it was something that was a kind of comfort food for me. But a lot of it was just around food quantities. So I didn't I didn't weigh my foods, because for me, I don't know, I linked that with maths. And for me, with how my brain works, I'm just not really like a mathematical person. I don't really like seeing numbers. So I just used to look at foods in quantities. So it would just be about the complete visual of how much, or the size of the plate, or the size of the cutlery. I started to eat with smaller cutlery, smaller plates. And then I just completely lost all sense of what was enough or what was normal. By normal, I mean what my body needed, and what was normal. Like, I would go around and, you'd be eating with friends, and I couldn't enjoy my own meal because I was constantly looking at what everyone else was eating. And in the end, I kind of removed myself from any situations where food was kind of implicit. And even if we'd go out for a night out and people would grab food afterwards. I'd always wait until I was back home to eat. And it's interesting because it wasn't necessarily about the fact that I wouldn't enjoy the food out. It was more that I would be so busy looking at what everyone else was eating, the size of their portions, that I couldn't mentally switch off and enjoy myself. So I knew that the only thing that I could do is go out for a coffee with someone, which was obviously quite harmful to not just myself, but to the relationships in my family. So, my family, my friends, people stopped seeing me as much. And I ended up just only going out in very kind of safer situations. I used to kind of look up menus and stuff beforehand, which was great because when I looked at the menu beforehand, it made my mind a lot more reassured. But it was definitely an element of obsessive compulsion. And the people who I've talked to in my community, for me personally, I'm very type A. There's two kind of personalities. Type A, which is kind of that perfectionism, that compulsion, that need for routine, never being able to be out of routine. And then there's type B, which is, people who are maybe, how do I explain this? They are just sort of like on the go, doing everything. Nothing's really planned, but they get everything done in a bit more of like a chaotic way. But there's no kind of perfectionism. It's just like, okay, I'm going to get it done. And there's less like overthinking. And people say that Reds, when it's kind of known, usually falls in the type A category person. And then Reds, when it's just like, oh, I don't realise I'm underfueling or I've forgotten to eat, is usually around the type B person. Obviously, there's grey lines, but I definitely fall into type A. So for me, I couldn't really, the biggest struggle for me was actually the friends and also supermarket shopping, because I used to probably go to 6, 7, 8 different supermarkets and walk out with probably one item. A lot of those items, at Redscue, it's all about having transparency, natural ingredients, not throwing in a load of ultra high processed protein powders and artificial things, because for most people who have underfueled and overtrained, number one, that's really not very helpful for the gut, and secondly, it can generate a lot of fear because the trends nowadays are all eat high protein, low calorie, low carb, and because that's constantly shouted at you from all angles in the supermarket, you go around, it's like, oh, low calorie, oh, high protein. I saw a high protein pancake the other day, which really confused me because I don't know when pancakes started going high protein. Next, they're going to be, I don't know, convincing people that you need to add protein into your coffee. Actually, I think there is a high protein coffee. Anyway, so a lot of the time when people are kind of coming back from these habits and behaviours that society told us were so normal, and that the supermarkets are promoting left, right and centre and commercialising, to then see them all over again is really, really triggering. And so the point of building Redscue and the Redscue energy bars and the Redscue jars were, I'm going to show you actually, was to kind of show that in society, what we've been told is not necessarily the truth. And it's really hard to say, because when you're constantly being bombarded with the same messages over and over again, they're obviously going to stick in your mind. And so for me, I'd go out and we'd be mid-cycle and I'd be thinking, oh, I can't have that because that's not something I would frequently pick up in the supermarket, because I had a list of very neat foods that I would eat. And, it was the things like the low-calorie hot chocolate, the quinoa, the cauliflower rice, the healthy wraps. Those things that are like foods trying to be healthier or trying to be promoted as healthier, and then you actually look at the packet and you think, actually, I don't understand why there's 500 ingredients on this, but I went for it because it was the low calorie food. And that's the hardest part, is that you realize you've been tricked. And so the whole point of Redscue is bringing it back to, so we don't use any oats, it's not very heavy on your gut. We don't use any protein powders or artificial flavors. Everything is natural. It's got all of the micronutrients that you need for your body. So a lot of the kind of vitamin deficiencies that we see in Reds, underfueling, or just generally people in general, is vitamin D, C, iron, calcium, zinc, magnesium, manganese, and it includes all of those, but in a very natural way. So we use Fufu flour, which is an endurance, so it's used in West Africa for endurance populations and the general culture. We don't talk about it or use it in the UK, apart from now with Redscue. And that's because it is used as a very natural fuel. It contains all your natural minerals, all your natural carbohydrates into one, and then we turn that into our bars and our jars. Now, I first found about Fufu when I was training in Spain, and I was training with track athletes there from Morocco, and they'd found out about Fufu, and they used it as general fuel because it was very easy on the gut. They could eat it right before their session, they could eat it after their session with some kind of protein, and it would give them everything that they needed. And they never had the kind of same gut stress issues that we all seem to have in kind of like the group of Spanish athletes that I was in. And it really surprised me because I'd never really thought too much about the fact that my diet could be so related and my stress could be so related to why I had such bad gut health issues. Now, when I experienced Reds, I ended up in the hospital. I wasn't fueling enough at all. My gut wasn't absorbing any nutrients, and all of the foods, so I went low FODMAP. FODMAP stands for, I'm going to have to read this out because it's a really long, confusing word, and I still can't say it. So it stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. What does that mean? Well, so it's anything, so low FODMAP means that you remove specific trigger foods that are poorly absorbed in the gut. So for example, wheat, garlic, onion, beans, lactose, fructose, like fruits and honey, sorbitol, mannitol, sweeteners. For me, actually, it was coffee, tomatoes, anything really acidic, so like fruit juices. And when I tell you I used to be like, I couldn't function. I genuinely couldn't function. I'd have one of those foods, or it would touch one of those foods, and my gut would just, it would almost like the acid would just jump. It was like having terrible acid reflux. So then I would be in bed for maybe 3-4 hours of the day. My energy would be zapped. I couldn't move. And then I'd wake up and I'd have a lot of fainting spells. And a lot of that was just because I wasn't fueled, but I couldn't eat because my gut wasn't absorbing the nutrients. So it was just a cycle that just kept repeating itself. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. And after I fainted about 3-4 times, it started to get just quite dangerous. So I went to visit the hospital, and they said that I had potential appendicitis. They said to go on low FODMAP, and that was kind of the recommendation. There wasn't really any follow-up to that. So I turned to low FODMAP for around 2 years, and I kind of just removed all of those foods out of my life. So that was the chocolate, the tomato, the juice, the coffee, anything acidic. And I never really thought about the fact that that was I was actually removing, because FODMAP, a lot of it is about the kind of, you know, the fruits, the honey. They are short chain carbohydrates, so sugar, starch, fibers that are poorly absorbed in the small intestine. It didn't really raise in my mind until I had relative energy deficiency in sport and learnt the importance of carbohydrates, that actually I was removing so many of the foods that actually my gut really, really needed. And I think because I never got that advice, and there was no kind of product, bar, jar, anything out there. It was just, you know, they were just telling me to go low FODMAP, and that was just the advice. And you're thinking, well, this just isn't really helpful because my body's in a state of survival, shock and stress. I'm not absorbing any nutrients. What do I do? And that's precisely where Redscue came from, because I couldn't spend more time going into a supermarket, confused about what to eat, not knowing if my gut was going to handle it, being told that I was potentially celiac. So then I cut out gluten, and then you cut out dairy, and then you're just essentially on an elimination diet. And I just needed one product that had everything in it that I needed for my body, but wasn't heavy oats, and meant that I could digest it really quick and still be able to enjoy my life and not feel zapped of all the energy and just be fatigued all the time. I was just chronically fatigued. And my injuries didn't start recovering until I regularly started taking Redscue. And that was kind of the test for myself. For my gut was like, can I handle this? I have probably one of the most sensitive guts on the planet. And now that we work with so many active people, athletes, people who are in the professionals, working professionals, anyone who kind of experiences extreme stress and, you know, the impact of it on the gut. Now that we work with so many other people and we see that they're all saying the same thing, like, I can manage it mentally, I can manage it physically. And that was the point of Redscue, you know, that lived experience of seeing, like, we've seen every side to it. I've seen the hospitals, I've seen the doctors, I've been ignored, I've been listened to, I've been told to go on elimination diets, I've done restriction, I have done every part of it. And it messes so much with your entire life, because people are just like, well, you know, we'll all eat in moderation and like everyone will be fine and life will be fine. But supermarkets didn't ever start from a place like that, and society doesn't ever start from a place like that. We've had the Atkins diet, the paleo diet, the ketogenic diet, GLP-1 jabs, high protein diet, fiber maxing. We have just promoted everything but carbohydrates, really, and they've all been elimination or restriction. Nothing's ever been moderation. So we're all not starting from a place of balance, and society doesn't really promote that. It kind of thrives off the capitalist system of push harder, bootstrap. You know, it's like the American dream. I don't live in America, but you know, the idea of the American dream is you work and you work and, you know, you fulfill your life based on how hard you work, and everything will come to you. It's that like manifest destiny. And it's this narrative and these behaviors that, especially if you're type A, you just latch onto. You know, I latched onto all of that. Oh, I'm disciplined, I'm productive, sport is my identity. And if I haven't done my sport that day, I haven't had a productive day. And that is probably the hardest part of realizing when you hit a point. And it didn't hit me, I didn't just have like a sudden revelation one day, but I did reach a point where I just couldn't believe that I had lasted or hadn't got a more permanent or more damaging injury because the behaviours and habits that I was doing. I mean, I tore my Achilles twice and I had appendicitis. I'm not saying that you have to reach that extreme point, and that wasn't extreme, because it was. But, you know, I genuinely, some of the habits that I was doing, I don't know how I survived on them for that long. And so the whole point of starting Redscue was really just to stop it before it starts, or just to be that helping hand, you know, whether it is with a fueling jar, a bar, a community, or just someone else that has experienced that story like you. That is the point of starting Redscue, because, you know, people start businesses a lot of the time to kind of jump on the trends, and we're very anti-trend, you know, we want to promote everything in a way that makes people feel listened and heard, and that's precisely why we do what we do.